Hi, I'm Bhavna Dalal. I'm a leadership coach, and we are here today with Dr. Sieglinde Pfaendler. She is the innovation manager at Bosch, and Udhay Prabhu. He heads digital labs for Bosch. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And what we're going to talk about today is just have a panel discussion on the key challenges in the talent and the skill gap in emerging technologies, and more specifically IoT. Yeah.
Perfect.
So Uday, what would you say is happening in the industry today with regards to IoT and emerging advanced technologies?
Okay, so IoT is currently a very strong buzzword, and a lot of companies, a lot of startups are working on this particular topic. And you can see by the increase in number of startups related to this particular technology.
True.
So IoT has actually enabled a lot of possibilities in the manufacturing space, in the automotive space, in healthcare, in retail. So it's fast becoming sort of wanted technology when you want to build new products, you want to connect to products, you want to monitor products. And IoT has become very essential in industry today to either add new revenue streams or to bring down costs by virtue of monitoring them. And this has also brought in a lot of new things into the marketplace. The common things like you would have seen with Uber, the Swiggies, which are using technology to create a very fast accessible market space.
Right.
On the other hand, things like the retail space where people are able to monitor what is going on in the store and take decisions immediately. So people are using this to take quick decisions, understand statistics about their respective areas, and it's fast also becoming a commodity in certain areas.
But
And therefore it is also a very good thing for you.
There's a trend that we've seen that IoT's been evolving. Before it was just about getting things connected.
Right.
And now it's moving them into that cognitive space as well as personalized space. How can we get them to start making decisions that are reliable and useful to us as a person?
Oh, okay.
But
So
also
not
make
just
it
about
sustainable.
products
Yeah.
and in all of the larger industries, but even affecting a single consumer on a day-to-day basis. Is that what you
Yeah.
mean? With their personal choices?
With their personal choices. So
Oh, that's interesting.
As Bosch as a company, we're moving into an era where we're looking at solutions, not just hardware, but solutions that have sensing, that have software, and are also very relevant to our daily lives.
So there are two topics which are very prevalent. Mass customization, right?
Okay.
So Bhavna, myself, all drink one coffee. That is mass customization. So you go to say Asok Sagar, you ask for coffee, you get one coffee. You don't get versus now you go to a vending machine, and the futuristic vending machines understands who is Bhavna. Because it identifies you by your phone, and then it says, okay, Bhavna likes her coffee this way, less sugar, more thing, and a little bit less milk, etc. It customizes to you.
Right.
So you have bulk averaging versus mass customization,
Right.
and this is also by virtue of information coming from your phone to servers or taking active decisions. So a lot of information. So as she rightly mentioned, the first phase was, are you able to monitor many things? Are you able to access information remotely, easily, fastly? Second is, what do I do with this information? I analyze the information, I create dashboards, I give you statistics.
Right.
And the next phase is, what do I do with that information that I have analyzed? Taking decisions, taking actions. So that's where machine learning, artificial intelligence comes into picture. So
Right.
the evolution of just monitoring to actually taking decisions autonomously is where the whole industry is progressing.
Okay. Okay. So then the criticism, with respect to data and all of that, which is one of the big criticism towards IoT has
True.
been about this retaining data. So what do you think of that? How do you handle that?
Yeah.
There are various strategies for handling that, right? A lot of systems are moving towards only releasing data that's absolutely necessary.
Okay.
So doing a lot of local processing and making sure data is expunged when it's not required anymore.
Mm.
And new technologies like blockchain or hyperledger, they're trying to look at making, if not a bit more transparency in the process. Maybe not complete hiding of data, but showing at least who's seen your data.
Right, right. So now that we have a little background on IoT and how the industry is seeing it going forward, let's talk about the people who will actually enable this, right? The talent. So what is your take on the talent needed
No,
to
I
build
think,
these systems?
I think there are two kinds of talent hubs today. No, India is a very strong talent hub. We are pretty much engineering the solutions for the whole wide world.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody wants, e-retail platform, they come to us. If somebody wants data analytics to be done, they come to us. We are the largest center for Bosch outside of Germany for a lot of engineering and other topics. But there is also an aspect within technology about fundamental research and applied research and complex systems. So we are in this phase now where we are doing a lot of fundamental research in the West. But in India, we are doing a lot of applied research. So because of the high incidence of service culture here. And so the
So
talent
could you
requirements
explain
are-
that in a little bit more detail, the difference between fundamental research versus
Yeah.
applied research?
So fundamental research is what comes typically out of academia.
Right.
The scientists who are working on great things that are at a very fundamental, pure sciences level,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they come up with, for example, if you look at IoT, the base of how do you come up with a next generation communication system all happens in the research labs.
Right.
The 4Gs, the 5Gs originate in the basic research companies. And then when it becomes a usable module, it comes into the mainstream where they use it to make phones or coffee machines or whatever. So that
True.
is the applied. You create a product out of the technology.
Okay.
And engineering goes predominantly into making the product.
Right.
But how do you came up with the technology to feed that is the base aspect of it. So whoever tackles the base technology first gets prime access to the technology, is able to play a premium role, price himself in the market. Whoever works on the applied portion of it is fighting with a large chunk of the population, so he becomes more of a commodity
So there's
player.
more competition in
There's
that
more
space.
competition, and in that competition, whoever comes out with a cheaper, better, faster device wins.
Right.
The same. If you take the example of phones within India, we had a lot of people who tried to build phones in India, the Micromax and so on. But now they're swamped by the Chinese, right? Because nobody is able to match the price. The technology is the same.
Right.
Right. So there are these two aspects of engineering, base engineering and applied engineering.
The government has a lot of initiatives where they're trying to bridge this gap. So when you have fundamental research, you're looking at trying something out and it may not work 100% of the time, right? And the thing is that if you have a technology at home, you want it to work 100% of the time. You don't want your email to fail for a day. So the engineering details that have to go into fixing that is quite costly, right?
Oh, I see.
So a company will be a bit skeptical to invest in all that money until they see that there's a real business proposition, and the professors might find that a bit difficult or tedious. So the government has put together several initiatives through the Department of Science and Technology, such as Imprint, which is a way to get academia and industry to work together with some support from the government to bridge that gap.
Right. And so you in particular are really, navigating those two worlds and trying to bridge that gap personally as well, right? You.
One
So
of
tell us a
my
little bit
focus,
about
yeah,
your
one of my
background.
focuses in the organization, because I'm coming from an academic background. Actually,
Right.
my PhD is in quantum sensing for quantum computing. So a lot of
I
people
didn't-
ask,
okay.
what are you doing here? And the thing is that after I finished my PhD, I wanted to work on technology that was really going to be used. So I shifted to electrical engineering, and I worked with Nokia, I worked with startups, and despite the best intention, I could see that still it was very difficult to get that knowledge transfer, right? And what I realized is you needed someone who's like a translator, right? Who speaks academic and another person who speaks business.
Right.
Because the just agreeing on the goals and communicating the goals will be a misunderstanding. So here in Bosch, one of my main focuses is to support teams who want to work with academia, sit with professors and help them understand in a way that both parties can actually work on something together.
Okay. So what would be other good profiles of people who can be such a translator as you? What would they need to have in them as people?
So I would encourage a lot of people who are learning, who are in universities, to join an entrepreneurship club. Many of the universities now, for example, Indian Institute of Science, all the IITs, they're having entrepreneurship cells now. Right? So join those clubs, start to meet startups, understand what their pain points are. So get out of your technology comfort zone and start to understand what the real business pains are. And if you have an uncle who has a company, go, door-to-door sales with him and really find what the pain is to make 1 rupee.
Right. So Udhay, like you were saying earlier, that we in India have such fabulous universities, and we have brilliant people coming out of these universities, and they are obviously exposed to a lot of research while they are studying in these universities. So what happens to all of these people? Like, what happens to these people who are already exposed to research, who know the importance of research? Do you see it translating that in the business world when they come out of college? What happens there?
Yeah, so there are two kinds of people, people who want to work with technology and people who want to make money, right? So it's a very simple decision to make.
I want both.
So what happens typically is, you look at the supply-demand ratio in India. There's a huge supply of engineers, but there's also a huge demand for engineers. But unfortunately, the demand is predominantly coming from the service industry. And who are the service industries? The Infosys, the TCSs, Bosch as well, who are looking to engineer products. But the base product conceptualization and ideation and the fundamental activities would have happened probably in the US or Europe. So we are in the phase where the engineering is happening, but we are not in the area where we are creating a development of product. But if you look at some of the people who have taken the initiative to migrate to the left hand of the product life cycle, some of the core IoT guys who feel that they can do much more, they move to the US, go into the Bay Area where more fundamental research and fundamental applications are happening, and they become very successful. That environment is not that strong in India. So because we are down the curve. So most of the startups that are happening out here are predominantly in the area of application, right? So which is a little bit more on the general space. And so the number of startups that are failing are also very high, because they are working on a very small space that is populated with a lot of people.
Yeah. So tying into your earlier point that though we have a lot of startups now in India, but they're not as successful because they are in that part of the band, not the core innovation of taking it from the research stage and converting it into products or business, but the next level where it's mature enough.
Correct.
But everybody can see that.
Correct.
And so most of our Indian startups lie in that band.
Exactly. So if you look at where is autonomous driving happening in Europe and US, where are the new artificial intelligence topics being ideated there? But you don't hear much about what is happening here, because we are a little bit down the curve, a bit of a laggard, if you can call it that, where you're a little bit behind in terms of having access to the first level of knowledge. So you're doing with what you get, which is already public. When it is already public, that means there are so many people working on it. Your chances of success are extremely remote, or you're in a very tight competition, and then price comes into picture. So when price comes into picture, you're already
too late.
Yeah, too late. It's a commodity space.
So what suggestions would you have for these startups?
So there are two things that has to happen. Corporates have to invest into fundamental research, like what we are doing with Bosch. Try to bridge that gap, make the base technology people to think business, and for the business people to think base technology. So both has to happen simultaneously. it is also very important that people are educated on looking at what is it that will make their product a success. Does it have premium material? Does it have premium status? Is it very early in the game? Are you ahead in the hype curve? Are you able to distinguish yourself from the competition because you are much ahead of the pack? Right. And also, do you have simultaneously a business case? Does it solve a business problem? Will the customers who buy it actually see value? Right. So these two things are extremely important for any organization as well as a startup.
So you always have to take the call though, whether you really want to be that first leader in the field or the quick second follower, right?
Right.
Sometimes you can implement something in a much more ingenious way, even though you're solving the same issue. And in India, one of the most famous examples of that is the Uber-Ola race, right? At one point, everyone's using Ola. Next point, there's some change. Uber suddenly accepts cash, and everyone's switching to Uber. And you have Ola Pay like that. You see these kind of plays, and it's always trying to see what can I do that's unique and difficult to copy.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing you guys say is that yes, we innovate in re-engineering, and we've done very well in that in India as a country. But it's now about time to actually do that first level of innovation as well, right?
True.
So we've invested in 2 centers in ISC and in the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras in Chennai. So for very targeted focus areas. So in ISC we have cyber physical systems, and in Chennai we have data science and artificial intelligence. And they have a multi-pronged mandate. So they work with industry, so it's not just exclusively for Bosch. They're open to work with any industry on individual consultancy projects. They can work with startups, so they give them advice on the technology side, and they can also give them access to the business advice on their technology parks, as well as building up the skill base, right? We have a shortage of data engineers and people who have experience in artificial intelligence and these more advanced machine learning techniques. So they'll also offer different sorts of courses, so a dual degree program as well as continuing education.
Oh, that's fabulous.
But one of the biggest challenges is actually having the right set of data, right? And in India, we often train our systems on foreign data, on American data sets, on European data sets.
Right.
So that's something that we're also looking to encourage here. So we'd also applied for a project that's related to this future mobility program that the government is running. The acronym is TPEM, is the funding mechanism, and it's to look at drive cycles of electric vehicles. So understanding how people stop and start in their car. It's very different in Indian driving as opposed to abroad. And to make a device that will work effectively here, we need that. But it takes a community effort to build that. So that's what we're working with various universities. We're hoping the project will go through. We'll see.
Oh, okay. Well, good luck with that. That sounds pretty exciting. So, 2 questions are really coming up for me. One, you mentioned that bigger companies have these research facilities. How can startups incorporate the same thing without spending all of that time and money and effort which they have a lack of anyways, because you typically have 2 or 3 key founders who are trying to do so much. So how can startups take care of that? And then I'll ask you the second question after.
So I think what is very important is do you have the right relationships, say with a research foundation? It could be an university, it could be a corporate. But where is your source of information? So that is very important. So it is not necessary that you have people and doing research with you
in-house,
but are you collaborating such a way that you are getting the adequate research input to make a product great, right? So even in Bosch, if you see, we have a research organization and we have businesses, and both are tied together. So so research folks are not going about doing their happy research and publishing papers, but they have a business goal attached. So they are chasing businesses to say, okay, can you fund me? Can I take my research and apply it into your product? So we need that same situation in the startup culture also, where the universities like IIC offer research support to these small companies who cannot probably afford to do it themselves. And likewise, startups have to chase academia get connected and make sure that they are also looking at it. That's on the research side.
It takes, I mean, it takes a bit of sweat, right, to find the right partner. Someone equated it to like finding a spouse. You have to date a little bit before you find the right match, right? Maybe someone is really experienced in what you want, but they're just not available at the time,
Right.
or they're not interested, or you meet someone who's really friendly, but they're just not quite experienced that
that's
area.
the European way. So in India, you need a good aunt who will facilitate that.
Yeah, and that's what we have, right? A lot, whether it's a
That's a
company,
good analogy.
so like Bosch has DNA, the Discover, Nurture, Align program, so it's periodically finding ways of helping a startup align itself, right? Just to be able to speak to the right people within the organization. The organization's huge, right? Just
Right.
here in this entity of Bosch, we have around 18,000 people.
Wow.
So finding the right person, like I'm meeting new people every day, and I've been here for 2 years already.
Yeah.
So equally, universities have different cells or offices that help encourage interaction, and you just gotta knock on different doors because different people will be there at different times, and don't be discouraged is my message. So I was normally there as a cheerleader to help these guys. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, we'll go to the next one.
So you need all the components of the system. You need the startups to actively seek. You need the universities to actively put themselves out there.
Right.
But you also need the enablers like Sieglinde who will
Sieglinde.
bring them together and make sure that they are not missing out on these components.
And not to forget the venture capitalists and the investors who are
Exactly.
actually, and the mentors
Exactly.
of these founders who are actually helping them, and in other ways. So I guess this is a shout out to those venture capitalists and investors to really recognize the importance of research and somehow make the founders also aware of it and be those conduits, so to speak, in connecting them to these such resources.
Yeah, in India, we're also seeing that shift, right? Maybe some 5 years ago, most people were investing in apps, right? A company that makes an app because within a year you can get your money back. But now we're seeing people who really want to grow the IoT ecosystem. So we have VCs like IdeaSpring that focus solely on companies that have hardware, and they know that it takes a little bit longer for them to hit the market.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess one last question. We were talking about the talent and the skill gap, and you mentioned the folks who are really good and smart, but they get lured, so to speak, into the services and the money aspect of things. So what is the solution there? How can we get more people, and how can we get them excited? It's a realistic fact that they do need to earn. They've worked hard and they're really capable, and they also want a decent stream of income for themselves while being on this path. Of how can we be enablers of that?
When we're talking about startups, the things that we're saying also apply within organizations, right? Let's replace the word startup to taking a solution or technology from its inception, from its idea on a paper to an actual tangible thing, right? So if you're in a company, you almost have to act like a startup. You have to go knock on doors and get people to fund your activity, right? And you have to convince them it's worth investing in. How else do companies make new things? Right? You have your regular business that keeps your bread and butter on the table, but you have to constantly reinvent yourself.
Right.
So you need that kind of grit to say, where do I fit? Where does it make sense? And ask yourself those tough business questions.
Okay.
Yeah, it is also important that if you want to attract good talent, you need to show them the lure of the looker, not offer them the money upfront. So for that, you need to have a very strong case. You need to have done your research. You can talk about the connection to academia. You can talk about connection to the VC ecosystem, and how do you actually influence that talent to make that leap of faith and get into the organization. And that is very, very important. As long as you can demonstrate that you have covered all bases in terms of the business side, in terms of making the product a premium one, I think any talent would love to get into that. You would have seen the movement of talented people by the quality of startup. Right? You can all see how well can you advertise yourself. The more you advertise, the more you are solid in your foundation, money will come in. If money is there, you can get the talent, but you still have to do your first level homework. Make sure you're covering everything. You're not just trying to attempt a simple technology piece, but you have a bigger play.
That's a great leadership lesson right there. And
Yeah.
we always see the founders and after they've gotten famous and from where they are at, but very often the stories behind of how they started out and how they
Yeah.
get there, those need to be shared even
It
more.
has to be taught to everybody. It is a journey. There is no quick win. You're not going to make millions overnight. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes a lot of sweat.
I think it was a truly inspiring discussion, and I think I really got a lot out of it. And thank you guys so much for sharing your insights and really putting the effort and giving us the time. And really, really nice talking to both of you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you very much.
having us.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you.
having us. I think this is also
Thanks, everyone.
inspiring us to take a leap of faith and do something.
Okay, great.